1 second. All right. So first of all, hello, everybody. Welcome back. My apologies for not being in touch better. And hopefully we'll continue the classes as usual. Although there are going to be some interruptions for sure because of all kinds of things that are going on in with my kids and so on and so forth. But anyway, here I am tonight, and this is the person that we're going to be talking about tonight. I will show you a picture of him there. See this man here? So let me tell you a story about him. This is a story that just was told to me recently. Very interesting story about this man and another man, a friend of his. This man, his name is he passed away some time ago. His name was Rabbi Mendel. He was one of the Lubavitch Hasidim who lived in Russia, and he was imprisoned for 20 years actually by Stalin for the high crime of practicing and sharing his religion with his co-religionists. He wasn't proselytizing, but he was instructing other people in how to do things. So he was in prison for 20 years, separated from his family. And Russian prisons were no joke. There was no such thing as kosher food. There was no such thing as any normal facilities. You were there with bandits and robbers and murderers and the worst of the worst. Anyway, this Reb Mendel had a friend, and his friend was also imprisoned in the same camp. His friend was imprisoned for a shorter period of time, but anyway, was also imprisoned in the same camp. But they didn't know about each other initially, and then they got to find out, the prisoners whisper amongst each other, and they got to find out that they're each in the camp. They wanted to see each other very much. So where do you see a good friend of yours? The only way they figured out was they'd have to go to the bathroom, and they figured out a time when probably other people would be in the bathroom, or when they would be able to meet in the bathroom and so on. And they did. That's where they met for the first time. And then this man over here, Rabbi Mendel, said to his friend, "How are you doing? Are you depressed?" So he says, "Why? How can I not be depressed? I'm not able to see my family. I'm not able to participate in the commandments, the mitzvot of the Torah. In other words, I'm not able to eat matzah on Passover. I'm not able to do what's called lulav and etrog on Sukkot. I don't have a shofar. I'm not able to keep Shabbos properly. There's no kosher food in the camp. All they ate the entire time, or all that Reb Mendel ate the entire time that he was in the camps, was bread. And the bread was mixed with sawdust. That's how they made the bread in Stalinist prison camps. The bread was made, and that's all they had to eat, bread and water. They wouldn't eat anything else because it wasn't kosher. In any event, so this Reb Mendel says to his friend, who later his name was Rabbi Bishetsky. He said to him, "Are you depressed?" He said, "Of course I'm depressed. Why shouldn't I be depressed?" He said, "Listen, I want to tell you something." He said, "Your body they could put into prison, but if you're depressed, then they got your soul in prison as well. Don't be depressed. The situation is not a situation of your making. You're here because you have to be here for whatever reason it is. You have to be joyful. You have to be besimcha. You have to be in a state of constant joyfulness." And this Reb Mendel was always in a state of joyfulness. I knew him when I was a student in Israel. He was the chief spiritual advisor for all the students in the yeshiva, and for many years afterwards. And he was always in a state of joy. You can see him here in this picture. He's doing what's called, that's a very common Hasidic thing. He's farbringing. Farbringing means when you get together, a gathering, and you sit down and you talk about matters of spirituality. You talk about spiritual matters. You talk about matters of how we change ourselves, how we improve ourselves, and so on and so forth, how we get closer to the ultimate truths, how we bring out of ourselves the divine powers with which we were endowed, and so on and so forth. So this Reb Mendel was the chief He was the person in charge of ensuring that the students, the best was brought out of them in a spiritual sense, during their stay in that particular seminary, that yeshiva. And he was the man. I knew him actually quite well, and I was very friendly subsequently with his son, who lived in London. I lived in England for a while. I was a teacher out in a boarding school in England, a place called Carmel College, which no longer exists. But I was there for a period of time, and I knew his son as well. And his son became, just like Rabbi Mendel was my spiritual advisor, his son was also my spiritual advisor after the passing of his father. He was a wonderful man, a really beautiful person. Now, I'll just tell you another story about him just to illustrate the idea. The same Rabbi Vyshetsky, they lived together afterwards when they were freed from the camps. They lived together in a village called Kfar Chabad. That's where the yeshiva was, Kfar Chabad, the Chabad village. Chabad is a branch of Hasidism. Probably the most prolific branch and probably the biggest branch of Hasidism. In any event, it's called Chabad Hasidus or Lubavitch, the same thing. Chabad Lubavitch was the town. Chabad is the system. In any event, they both lived together in this little village, which is between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. That's where the yeshiva was. And I was in that, I lived in that village as well when I was in the yeshiva. So one night during Passover, on the night of Passover, the first night of Passover, we go through the whole story of the Exodus from Egypt and so on and so forth. And there's a requirement to eat matzah, that's unleavened bread, and to drink 4 cups of wine. So suddenly, towards the end of this festive meal, which is called a Seder, towards the end of this festive meal, Rabbi Vyshetsky said to his son, "Come, we got to go quickly to Rabbi Mendel. I get the feeling that he needs us." And indeed it was. When they walked in, they went they walked into Rabbi Mendel's house, and he was sitting on the couch with this big smile on his face, and he was saying, "I was hoping you would come." What was the problem? The problem was that he needed to go to the bathroom. His wife, he was 86 at the time, and his wife was maybe 84, and she simply could not lift him to take him to the bathroom. His legs, by this time, had failed him due to torture and various other things that he experienced in the camps, but he couldn't really walk very well. He couldn't get up and walk. At this point in time, he was 86, he was in a wheelchair, and he couldn't get up from the couch. So these 2 men carried him and went to the bathroom and so on and so forth. And the wife, when he came back, started rebuking him and telling him, "I told you, don't drink 4 whole cups of wine. It's gonna, you'll need to go to the bathroom and so on." And he just laughed, and he said, he looked at her and he said this in Yiddish, von Welt, 86 Jahre. I've been laughing at the world for 86 years, and now you want me to change? Right now you want me to start taking the world seriously? The doctors told me, okay, I know the doctors told me I shouldn't drink 4 cups of wine. So what? I'm drinking 4 cups of wine anyway, because that's what God told me. And lacht sich euch von Welt, laugh at the world, forget about it. That's the person that I want to talk about tonight, or rather not so much him, but I want to talk about the attitude behind it. The whole concept that we're talking about over here is a very important concept called, in Hebrew, the Hebrew is Simcha Poretz Geder. Joy breaks all boundaries. Joy breaks all boundaries. You see, that was Rabbi Mendel's thing, was that you have to be joyful in any situation, because that'll break through the issues that you have to deal with. Everybody has to deal with issues. There's no question about it. Now, you may say that, well, he was an important person. He was a tzaddik. He was a very, spiritual person that had been instructed in the whole system and so on and so forth. But how's that relevant to me? So I'll tell you another story. It's a night of stories tonight. There's another story which somebody sent me, and I found it a very, very moving story. It was a story based on 2 pictures. I don't have the pictures here, but they could be found. One picture, one photograph, was of a young woman. She didn't look so young. Actually, she looked old in that picture. a woman in an orange jumpsuit. A jumpsuit is what you wear in prison. She was in an orange jumpsuit, and her hair was all falling out, and her eyes were sort of half up in her head, and her face is extremely thin and looked very worn and wrinkled and terrible. And then there was another picture next to it of a young woman, shining, happy face, wearing a graduation cap and a graduation gown, and holding a certificate, which was her doctorate of psychology. It was the same woman. She told her story. Her story was that when she was 7 years old, her mother was a single mother, introduced her to drugs. By the time she was 15, she was completely hooked on crack cocaine. Sometime later, either because she was stealing food or stealing money to buy drugs, or for some other reason, she was arrested. She was arrested once, only for a few months, and then she was arrested again for a much longer period of time, and she was in jail for a while. During her time in jail, she went through cold turkey, basically. Cold turkey is withdrawal from drugs. She was an addict, a complete crack cocaine addict, which is apparently one of the worst possible addictions. I have no idea, but that's what they say. And she went through this extremely painful withdrawal. It would be like someone sort of ripping your innards out, that kind of thing. Extremely painful. The body comes to depend on this cocaine, this crack cocaine, and it's very, very painful situation. Anyway, she got clean. It took more than a year, and during that time, she started to reevaluate her life. She said, "What the heck am I doing? I'm going to land up like my mother. Yeah, dead at 40, 45, whatever it was. And that's not what I want. I'm capable of better than that. I can do more than that. I'm surely capable of turning my life around." So she did. She started turning her life around while she was in prison. She started taking out books from that prison library or whatever it is. She started learning. She only had an 8th grade education, so it's very hard for her in the beginning. She dropped out of school at 8th grade. She was a drug addict already. But she somehow or another, over the period of time, she caught up. And she had a tremendous will to progress and to move forward. And she eventually got her doctorate in psychology from university. I don't remember which university it was, but she got a genuine doctorate of psychology. And she was going to be a doctor of psychology who helped other people with their addictions. Been there, done that, she said. And therefore, I'll say that. Yeah, one second, Aidan. And therefore, she decided that her life was turned around, and she indeed turned her life around. So you see, there are many, many cases, and of course, there's many stories. That's only one particular story, but there are many stories where people have managed to turn their lives around completely. And one of the ways to do this is simcha poiretz geder. I'm going to say it again in Yiddish: simcha, joy, poiretz, breaks through all boundaries, all the boundaries of a person. Why is that? That's what I want to get into tonight. That's the concept that we are going to address tonight. Why is it that joy can break through all boundaries? The answer that's given generally is that most of the boundaries that a person experiences, most of a person's boundaries are emotional boundaries. They're usually not intellectual. Intellectual boundaries are also boundaries, but that's not usually what limits a person so much. Yes, it's true, a certain mindset can limit a person to certain ways of thinking, therefore certain ways of emoting, certain ways of acting, and so on and so forth. But the real rigid boundaries that a person experiences, which is very hard to get out of, are the boundaries of the emotional qualities of the soul. What are the emotional qualities of the soul? The emotional qualities of the soul are, as we've explained a number of times, and I should have had my chart up, and I don't. One second, let me just get it for you. Sfirot. Okay, Sfirot and soul powers. I think that's the one I want to look at. This one. Let me just see. I hope this is the right one. Yeah. All right, let me share screen again, and I will show you what I'm talking about. All right, the higher powers of the soul The just for those people who are not familiar, these are called the sphirot. The sphirot are the internal structure of reality. There are 5 different planes of reality that are spoken about in Kabbalah. They're called the worlds. World, the word world in Hebrew comes from the word olam. It's the word olam in Hebrew, which derives from the word he'elem, concealment. These are 5 levels of concealment of godliness, concealment of the divine light in order to create a physical world. So the highest world is called Aram Kadmon, the next world down is called Atzilut, the world below that is called the world of Bria, the world of creation, and then there's the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, and the world of Asiyah, the world of action, the world of actual physical being. But each of these levels has an internal structure. That internal structure is called the structure of the Sphirot, and this is the structure of the Sphirot. Ignore what's in the boxes for right now. So the structure of the Sphirot are Keter, Chochma, Bina. When we count Keter, we don't count Dat. When we count Dat, we don't count Keter. What Keter? Keter is the idea of the transcendent power and the most transcendent power of the soul. It is basically expressed in faith, in delight, and in will. Delight. That's a very important word, which we're going to get to soon. We're going to get back to that word soon, because Simcha derives from delight, as we will explain. Okay, so these are the intellectual faculties then. These here are the intellectual faculties called Chochma, Bina, and Da'at. Chochma is wisdom, intelligence. Bina is understanding, joy. Da'at is consciousness, knowledge, awareness, intimate connection, etc., etc. By the way, if anyone wants one of these charts, you can just drop me a message at Kabbalah Decoded at gmail.com, and I will send you a chart free of charge, no charge for such things. You can have the chart of the Sphirot and the chart of the here I've listed it also as the same Sphirot are also the powers of the soul. They're corresponding to the 5 worlds or 5 levels of consciousness. These 5 levels of consciousness, each one corresponds to a different world. The highest level of consciousness, called Yechida, corresponds to the world of Aram Kadmon and beyond. It's called God consciousness. Down to the lowest level of consciousness, the Nefesh, which is consciousness of the physical body and through the senses in the world around us. But what I was explaining as regards joy, that joy breaks through all boundaries. Where are the boundaries? I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so that we can see all the emotions together. Okay, here, actually, I don't have to make it that small. Here, these are the emotional qualities here. I'm going to draw a blue box around them. These are the 6 emotions of the soul. Chesed is kindness. Gvura is the concept of, well, you can see it over here. It's written down. Kindness, love, emotional connection. That's chesed. Gvura is might or fear, the need for privacy, to set boundaries, etc. All of these 6 emotions are where the problems come in. Because just as you have a positive quality, so you have the possibility of that, for example, chesed turning into a negative quality. Instead of chesed being kindness and love, chesed can be lust and self-love. Lust is kindness that has gone wrong, right? Self-love, self-indulgence. That is chesed of impurity, of the impure forces. Similarly with gvura. Gvura is the concept of a person's feeling of capability, might. Yeah, also awe, fear in a positive sense, not fear, cowering fear, but fear of doing the wrong thing, fear of the Almighty, fear of, it's called fear of God. Awe is a better word probably. The need for privacy, gvura. The need to set boundaries for yourself, for others, that's gvura. The opposite quality, the negative quality, as you can see over here in the brackets, will be anger, jealousy, hatred, and so on and so forth. So all of these 6 qualities, these 6 emotional powers of the soul, all of them tend to limit the person in a certain way, especially when they're in the negative mode thereof. When a person is involved in lust or self-love, or he's involved in, let's say, defiance or worry, alienation, loneliness, as you see in all of these qualities over here, deviousness, lying, cheating, that tends to be a limitation on that person's personality. He cannot get out of himself, right? How does the person get out of himself or herself, obviously? How does the person get out of themselves? That's by virtue of what gives birth, what gives birth to all of these 6 emotional qualities. What gives birth to these qualities is the power of Bina, the soul power called Bina. About Bina, it says, Aim habanim smecha. The mother of children is happy, is joyful. Now, what does that mean? It means, in our context here, it means that Bina is the mother. Chochmah is called the father sphira. Bina is the mother sphira. She's the mother of these children. All the emotional qualities are the child of Bina. It has to do with a certain mindset that brings forth certain qualities in all of these 6 qualities, but whether positive or negative depends on the mindset. That is all in Bina. Now, Bina, one of the aspects of Bina is that Bina is the mother of children, is joyful. In other words, in order to produce the children and for the children to go on the right path, that is through a sense of joy. Probably some of you may have been in a family where there's a tremendous amount of joy in the family. You never really have discipline problems, issues, emotional problems in a happy family. When the parents, and particularly the mother, project joy and happiness, then the children are just stable, 2 feet on the ground. What's the right word? They're just emotionally stable. They're, people that you can trust, people you can rely on, people you're happy to keep company with, and so on and so forth. That all comes about because of Simcha. Now, I have to explain why it comes about because of Simcha. Simcha is the outward manifestation of a much deeper level in the soul, right? That level in the soul, that deepest level in the soul is called Atik. It corresponds in Keter to the level called Atik. It's the deepest level of, one of the deepest levels of the Sfirot. There's 3 levels in Keter. It's the middle level, but that's a very, very extremely high level. And that is the concept of Atik, is the concept of Ta'anug, of delight. Delight expresses itself in joy. So when a person feels delight, what's the delight in? The delight is not in eating chocolate chip cookies or in ice cream and things like that. Delight is in the delight of being alive, the delight in the divine presence, delight in being able to help another person, the delight that a person feels when they're on top of their game, when you can see that a person is shining and they're there and they're real. That person is experiencing delight on a fairly regular basis. When we mean delight, not in a physical sense at all. It's obviously, the word in English is not such, doesn't convey it very well, but maybe the last part of the word, instead of light and delight, it should just be called light. It's the light of the soul, essentially. The light of the soul is shining out. That's the concept of delight. That's Atik. And that is manifested in reality in Bina, which then affects all of the emotions. So what happens, therefore, when a person is in a state of joy, and a state of real joy, when it's in a state of real joy, and the joy is palpable, you can feel it, it's real, it's not manufactured. Now, sometimes you have to fake it until you make it. Sometimes you have to manufacture the joy. There's various ways of doing that. One of the ways of doing it is simply by reading on a regular basis good news, happy news, and even jokes. You'd be surprised. There is actually a therapy, psychological therapy called laugh therapy, where they prompt you by various means into laughter, and they find that not only does it affect the person emotionally, it lifts up the emotions when a person starts to laugh, but it actually has a physical effect on a person, a physical effect on a person, in such a way that a person can actually be cured from the most horrible diseases simply through laughter. Now, I'm not saying that that's the only cure. One has to always, of course, go in the way of in the natural path and the natural way of doing things. In other words, you have to consult your doctors and so on and so forth. But the doctors are not going to tell you laugh. The doctors are going to give you this kind of medicine, that kind of medicine, and this procedure, that procedure. But the best medicine is laughter. And if a person can be in a state of joy throughout maybe the pain and the difficulties of illnesses and so on and so forth, or psychological illnesses, but come out of the other end as a joyful person, that is going to be what heals the person. So in other words, what I'm trying to say basically is that when a person is in a state of joy, that has the effect of revealing the deepest levels of the powers of one's soul. The deepest levels of the powers of one's soul. So if one is, let's say, a very loving person, then if a person is in a state of joy, that love like bubbles to the surface and expresses itself in such a way that the person feels completely fulfilled at home, is helping people, and so on and so forth. And similarly with all of the other emotional qualities. Joy brings out the depth, the real depth of the emotion. So it's not just a superficial thing, it becomes a real thing. The essence of what the person is really comes to the fore, it comes out, it's expressed when a person is in a state of joy. And that's why Simcha Poretz Geder, joy breaks all boundaries. It breaks the boundaries of the personality. The boundaries that are caused by these midot, by these emotional qualities. Let me just explain another concept over here. And I should have done it like that. All right, let's see here. Whiteboard. Okay. Here on the whiteboard, you'll see, I'm going to write the word midah, right? Midah means an emotional quality, midah, right? Sorry, I'm writing with a mouse and it's not the most beneficial way of writing. Okay, midah, sometimes spelled with 2 Ds, but it doesn't matter. Midah is related to the word medida. Medida means measurement. Right? As you can see, they're almost the same word. In Hebrew, they're almost the same word. Medida means measurement because that's what the midah or the midot are. In fact, when you say the measurement of something, you want to ask about what's the measurement of that something, you say, or the dimensions of something, you say, Maha midot shelo. What are the midot? What are the measurements? What are the medidot? What are the limitations of it? Right? So the midot are limitations. The emotional qualities are generally limitations. When the joy mindset informs the emotions, that is the limitation of the emotion is removed and the true emotion actually comes out. In other words, it comes out in its essentially in its full glory in what it really should be. It loses its sense of narrowness and confinement and imprisonment. Just like Rabbi Mendel told his compatriots, if they've made you sad, if they put you into a depression, then they've captured your soul as well, right? They've captured not only your body, but your soul as well. Don't let them capture your soul. And from that point on, this Rabbi Vyshetsky changed his whole way of looking at things, and he did not go in the same direction at all. He changed his attitude and managed to survive the camps as a result, and became obviously an extremely close friend of this Rabbi Mendel. In any event, that is the concept of Simcha Poretz Geder. Joy breaks the boundaries of the emotional qualities that are holding us in, and they express themselves as the true essence of that particular quality, the true essence of love, the true essence of friendship, the true essence of faith, trust, whatever it may happen to be. Okay, that is the idea. So I'm open to questions. Okay, yeah. I've heard this concept of joy as a pathway to a relation to my Jewish learning. And I learned about Sufi practices to unify with the beloved, but many Sufi teachers warn about losing yourself in the ecstasy. Does Kabbalah teach this also? How do we guard against getting lost in ecstasy? Is it possible to experience too much joy or delight? Can you over-reveal the attic? Actually, I will tell you another story. There were 4 sages. Ben Zoyma, this was their names. It was the famous Rabbi Akiva, Ben Zoyma, Acher, and I just said his name a second ago, and I can't remember what it is now. Old age is creeping up on me. Anyway, there were 4 sages, and the 4 sages entered. It said that they entered the paradise. Paradise in Hebrew literally means orchard, but that's where the word paradise comes from. The word paradise from paradise. This is it's a story that's told in the Gemara, in the Talmud, in Masechet Chagiga. It's told the story of these 4 sages, Ben Zoyma, Ben Azai, Rabbi Akiva, and Acher. Acher is now someone named Elisha ben Avuya. They all entered paradise. Unfortunately, 3 of them did not come back. One of them, Heitzitz Umeis, he saw the beauty and the glory and the effulgence, the light, the overwhelming light of the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is a spiritual level. It's not a physical place. It's a certain spiritual level. And his soul left his body and didn't come back. That was Ben Zoyma. Ben Azai, Heitzis, Venivka, he saw and he became nuts, he became crazy. Why? Because it just couldn't, the light was too much for him, he couldn't handle it. And he had a nervous breakdown kind of thing. He wasn't ready for it. And Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, became an apostate because he said, how could it be that there are 2 realms? There's the divine realm and the physical realm. How could it be that there's 2 realms when there's only supposed to be one? And therefore he became an apostate. Later on in life, he changed his mind, but he became an apostate for a while. Anyway, Acher, it was called Acher, the other one. And then there was Rabbi Akiva. And the famous thing about Rabbi Akiva is that Rabbi Akiva, nichnas b'shalom v'yotza b'shalom. He went in peace and he came out in peace. In other words, to answer your question, Aiden, Rabbi Akiva had the right attitude. You're going in order to bring out what you experienced there and bring it into the world. You're not going there to remain there. There is definitely a danger in too much ecstasy. And I don't mean the drug ecstasy, I mean the emotional, overwhelming quality of emotional ecstasy. If it could even be called emotional is a question, but in any event, ecstasy means going outside of yourself, right? Self-transcendence. So self-transcendence can lead to never coming back. It can lead to a situation where a person does not want to deal with the world anymore. It doesn't, the world is just, too mundane for such a person. Rabbi Akiva was not that type of person. Rabbi Akiva showed us the proper way that you go in order to come out. And you came out in order to bring the light down. So that is definitely a very important concept in Kabbalah. It's called Ratzor V'Shov. You have to go up, but in order to come down. Ratzor, going up, but in order to come down. In other words, the, so to speak, spiritual elevator or escalator that there is between one level and another has two sides to it. There's the up staircase and the down staircase, the up escalator, the down escalator. Make sure that you know where the entrance is to the down escalator. And of course, this is something that a person has to be taught and drummed into the person, because immediately the person experiences this ecstasy. Very often people do not want to, they simply don't want to come back. I remember a person who was like that back in the day. I think they became more or less, they couldn't look after themselves anymore and become like almost a vegetable. This person went too high too quickly. In any event, it can happen, sure. In the Hasidic path, it's not likely to happen because there's a tremendous emphasis on everyday mundane activity, which restrains or holds back the person from going further than they're really capable of. Okay. I hope that answers that question. Okay. Manically experience and manically, I can cultivate the peaceful quality, the limit I can be lost in the orchard. It's being joyful, the state of being to experience the revelations. The state of being joyful is for the sake of joy and not necessarily only for the sake of revelations. The revelations will come. But the state of joy is basically the state of joy. The concept of joy is to spread light in the world, to spread, when you see a person when they're joyful, the light of the countenance proves that they're in a state of joy, in a state of tremendous happiness and upliftedness, and so on and so forth. It's not for me. In other words, the joy is not something for me. The joy is something that I want to transmit to others as well. You probably know from your own experiences that when you show other people a happy face, they can't but respond in kind, unless the person's a really twisted person. But generally, that's the way it is. Does it relate to the concept of returning to Egypt after going to Israel? No, not so much. Going to Egypt after that's the going back into the exile after the redemption. That's a different thing. A person should always be in a state of redemption and not ever want to return to the exile, but nevertheless live in the real world, live in the mundane world. We live in the real world in order to bring this world, the world in which we live, to a state where the godliness is manifested in the world on a daily and moment-to-moment basis. I mean, that's what we're all here for. In fact, I had mentioned last time that I'm going to start teaching a discourse, and the discourse that I want to teach actually deals with this concept in depth. I'll send you a link so you can have a look at the discourse to start off with. And it's in English. It's been translated into English, so we'll learn it that way. And then we'll see it from the inside, and I'll hopefully explain it well, hopefully. You aren't going to stay there. That's a great thing to remember. Yeah, you're not supposed to stay there. Okay, so awesome. I love that analogy, easy to understand. We're going to bring the light down and emulate creation downward, spread, unified back up. Thanks for yeah, good. That's the idea. Okay, folks, are there any other questions? I'll be happy to answer them. Anyone writing? Anyone? Well, thank you. Glad to be back. Yeah, it's been a pretty hectic month, I must say. I was mostly in New York and with family. I have 3 kids who live in New York, and it was pretty energetic while we were there. They're youngsters. Therefore, they have children and they're having children. As I mentioned, my son just had a baby girl a couple of days after we got back here, but we were expected to have the the baby all the time that we were there. But it was amazingly it was an amazing experience. The place where I was is the center of Chabad Hasidic life in Crown Heights in New York. And this is the festival called the Festival of Sukkot, but it's also called the Festival of Joy, the Festival of Rejoicing, which is actually why I chose this topic. And the joy is simply dancing with the Torah, dancing, even if you're not holding a Torah. Torah is a scroll of the law. The Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, are written on a scroll. And on Sukkot, particularly Simchat Torah, the last 2 days, Simchat Torah, we dance with the Torah going around, but there was dancing every night, with or without the Torah. The dancing is, you're dancing with the inner essence of your soul, essentially. You're dancing with God, you're dancing with the angels. And the dancing went on from sunset, or maybe a little after sunset, until after sunrise, 6:30 in the morning. There were people dancing in the streets. The streets were all blocked off. There were people dancing in the streets, sometimes with music, sometimes without music, depends on what it was. They were dancing the whole night. Men, women, children, everybody. tremendously, arousing experience, and something that one looks forward to. So, thank you very much. Shabbat shalom to you too. Yeah, thanks. Congratulations, my granddaughter. Yeah, thank you very much. So my son's wife had a daughter, and she is, does this tie into the parsha? No, not much. It does tie into the parsha to a certain extent. I'll explain all right, I'll just tack this on a little bit. One of the things that Noah was told when he made the ark, and of course, the whole making of the ark, even though it was actually, we believe it actually happened, he actually did build an ark, and all of the stories that are told are actual events that took place, but they're also symbolic events in the sense that we have to take away from that the inner teaching that it's supposed to represent. One of the things that God tells Noah when he makes the ark is, Tzohar ta'aseh l'teva, make for yourself a window in the ark. Now, this word Tzohar can be explained in two different ways. Window can be explained in two different ways. So, Tzohar could be a window to let light in. It could also be a source of light, not just letting light in, but creating light, something that creates light, that produces light. For example, certain, like uranium, for example, emit a certain light. So he was told to bring this precious stone aboard that would emit light for them while they were in the ark. So one of the things that the Baal Shem Tov, one of the fundamental teachings of the Baal Shem Tov is as follows. He says there's another verse. The verse says like this, and I'm going to put it on the screen on a whiteboard to be able to see it much easier. Let me just clear the whiteboard. 1 second. Clear all drawings here. Okay, so this is the word Tzohar. The word Tzohar means light, right? Tzohar. The word Zohar is related to the word Tzohar. It's not the exact same word, but it's related. Tzohar. Oops. That's an R at the end. Tzohar. Right? The Baal Shem Tov teaches as follows. When it's a time of tzara, tzara meaning anguish, difficulty, trouble, problems, suffering, tzara. In order, sometimes it's spelled with a hey on the end, an H on the end, tzara. In order to change this time of tzara, this lack of light, this time of suffering, into a window, so there's intermediate steps. The person has to, you see, you can. It's hard to see it in English. Much easier to see it in Hebrew. The word Tzohar in Hebrew, right? That's the word Tzohar in Hebrew. The same three letters, tzara, right? The same three letters, the same three permutations. This is a system of permutations that was discussed already in the very, very early Kabbalah in the 1000s by Abraham Abulafia, but it's also found in the Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah was a work composed by Abraham. It wasn't written down by him. It was only written down much later, but it was handed down from father to son to grandson and so on and so forth, all the way through the generations, as all of the oral Torah was handed down. There's the written Torah and oral Torah. The written Torah is scripture. This is the oral interpretation. So one of the teachings in the Sefer Yetzirah teaches exactly this idea of the permutation of letters. You permutate things in order to change reality, right? So the word Tzohar is what we're trying to, the source of light is what we're trying to get to. But it's a time of tzara. So how do you change tzara into Tzohar? So then you go like this, haratz. Now it would be written if it was exactly the same letters, except that when this letter appears at the end of the word, it takes on a slightly different form. So it's written like this, right? But it would be the same letters, haratz, someone who goes with alacrity, with energy, with enthusiasm. To do what? To do what it is that God wants, God rotzeh. See, again, the same three letters. when a person runs, haratz, when he runs to do what it is that God wants, then he can change what is a negative situation into a source of light. I think that story of Rabbi Mendel Futterfass is exactly the same story. He changed this anguish that the person was feeling, that his friend was feeling, into a source of light. It became a source of inspiration for him, that I can't let them capture my soul. My soul belongs to me, and I decide what happens with my soul. No matter what, it's not in the possession of the Stalinist regime. So that's how it relates to Parshas Noah. Noah was given the duty of changing this darkness into light, of changing the situation in which the world found itself into a source of light. He wasn't completely ready for it, even though he was a righteous person. Nevertheless, he wasn't completely ready. He became, at some point in time, he became depressed and started drinking. And that, unfortunately, kind of disqualified him for the role that he could have played, which was then taken up some time later by his descendant, one of his descendants, a great-great-grandson called Abraham. Abraham was the one that really started on the path of bringing light into the world. Okay, so that's how it relates to this week's teachings, and to this week's parsha, to this week's Torah reading, and yeah, that's how it goes. There are many very interesting things in this week's Torah reading, but I think suffice that for now. We've been speaking for long enough. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Have a great night, and see you hopefully next week. Hopefully next week, I can't promise you, but hopefully next week I will be teaching a Sefer Yetzirah class as well. It just depends on various circumstances. I've got all kinds of things that I have to catch up, and meanwhile I totaled my wife's car, and we have to go find a car and all kinds of other things. It wasn't my fault. Someone just turned suddenly in front of me, and anyway, my wife's car got totaled, so we have to go find ourselves another car. The insurance is paying, his insurance is paying for it, but anyway, there you are. Yeah, I didn't get hurt, thank God. Okay, so next week we'll be in touch. I'll let you know if I'm going to be teaching class Wednesday night, but also Thursday. Okay, good night to all, and have a great weekend. Bye now. Right, he was actually a very nice guy. He was a doctor, and he was a doctor in one of the local hospitals. Very nice person, actually. So, as I said to him, unfortunately, we had to meet under these circumstances, but we actually got quite friendly. All right, all the best, folks. See you next time. Why am I sharing screen? I should be ending it. Okay, good night. I'll put up the recording soon.